Hello, and welcome to Paranormal in Pennsylvania.
Where we discuss history and haunts.
Today's discussion takes us to Eastern PA to talk about Eastern State Penitentiary. I'm Sarah.
And I'm Erica.
Let's get into it. So we both grew up in over on the eastern side of the state.
Yes.
But you have never been here, correct?
No. And to be honest, I haven't done a lot of research into it either.
Shocking. You're the history major.
I know!
But I have been there for a tour, and I went during the day. They used to have the scariest haunted house. I'm doing quotation marks with my fingers. The scariest haunted house in Eastern PA. And it is said that the people that worked there kept account of how many people wet their pants.
Oh, God.
So maybe that title is fitting.
Right.
But I was always too scared to go to it. I love Halloween and paranormal stuff and haunted walkthroughs, but they took it to a next level. The building itself is freaky because it's a bit run down, and it's from such a different era. We don't really build places like that anymore. When I went, we looked at everything through a historical lens. The system, the owners, I guess, do a great job of presenting a lot of factual historical information, but a lot of bad stuff did happen there, and overall it just feels sad to be there. So to get into the history, it was created in the 1800s and closed in the 70s. It operated on what was called the Pennsylvania system until the 1910s, 1920s. And this system was meant to completely reform the inmates. It consisted of complete isolation and silence.
Well, that's not helpful for anybody.
Right. Their mind could have been in the right place. They also had a policy where it was very private when people were sentenced, and when they were taken to the jail, they had a hood on their head, one, so they couldn't escape because they wouldn't know their location.
Gotcha.
And two, so that no one could see them leaving the courthouse, with the idea that once they were rehabilitated in this complete silence and isolation, that no one would have known that they were in jail.
Okay.
Right, so no judgment. Not completely well thought out, but I guess there's good aspects to it.
Right.
Good thoughts. So once this system was abandoned, it somehow got even worse. The most famous figure in the prison was Warden Herbert Hardboiled Smith. And so that was his nickname, Hardboiled.
I feel like that's not great. I don't...
Not a nickname I would want, personally.
No, to be honest, any nickname associated with eggs is probably just not...
True.
Not solid.
True. And he ruled the prison. He's described as literally ruling it with an iron fist in the 20s and 30s.
Okay.
And so he was responsible for overseeing this transition out of the Pennsylvania system, and what are we going to do next? So this is where it gets into some of the tactics used in the prison, and I do just want to say that some of this stuff is difficult to hear, difficult to read, so discretion is advised here. So he basically switched to severe reform tactics. Silence is extreme, but he took it to a next level.
Right.
So the history of these things are enough to make your skin crawl without ghosts. So to start, there was a water bath, and inmates their full body was dunked into the water, and then they were hung outside on the wall in winter until ice formed on them.
Oh my gosh.
I know. And both being from Pennsylvania and growing up here, we know how brutal the winters can be.
Right, yeah.
So just...
That's awful.
Yes. There was also something called the mad chair, in which an inmate was bound so tightly that circulation was cut off, and that often led to amputations afterwards.
Oh my God.
Right. And so, again, we don't need to get into the whole prison system, but speaking specifically about this penitentiary, clearly these are not things intended to rehabilitate people.
No, clearly this is just brutal punishment for people who like to feel like they're in control.
Absolute torture. Okay, 2 more, and then we'll be done. So the iron gag was one. The inmates' hands were tied behind the back of their head and strapped to an iron collar in their mouth. And you've heard of this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen pictures too of what it would look like.
Yeah, and so if they moved their hands the wrong way, or had any sudden movements at all, it would cause their tongue to tear and bleed. Yeah.
Oh.
So that was also, from the research, it seems like that was also instituted during the Pennsylvania system as a punishment for breaking the silence.
Okay.
And then finally, we have the hole. Now, we watched BuzzFeed Unsolved investigate Eastern State before this episode, so you saw firsthand what the hole looks like. But for those that haven't seen that, these are underground cells where you can't really stand upright. They're 8 by 4 feet, and there is absolutely no light. You would have no human contact here. You were not let out for any exercise. Other inmates spent 23 hours a day in their cell, but were out for 1 hour.
Right.
These inmates were never let out for exercise. Only some of the cells had toilets, and they had little food, and because of where it was located, there was low airflow. So it said that their inmates often had trouble breathing due to lack of oxygen flow, because you have to remember this building is created out of stone.
Right.
So there's not a lot of flow. And just absolutely terrible.
Yes.
So, again, on its own, the description of Eastern State is enough to strike fear into anyone. No surprise to anyone, there's been a lot of escape attempts from the prison.
Right.
The biggest and most famous one was in 1945, where 12 prisoners dug a tunnel out of the wall, and they did this using spoons and crushed cans. They alternated shifts of 30 minutes each until they dug all the way to the other side of the fence. The way that they got away with this was that one of the prisoners on the team was a stonemason. So he created a false panel to cover the hole. So when the guards would come around and look into the cells, it would literally look like it was the stone wall.
Oh, that's clever.
Right.
That's so cool.
Yeah. They, however, chose to escape in broad daylight, and most were caught within hours, and all of them were caught within a day.
Oh, no. So none of them got out?
No, they all wound up in the hole as punishment.
Oh.
Yeah. So definitely a sad story.
I know. It sucks. They literally, they dug with spoons.
I know.
I
Think
feel
of
like
how
that's
long.
such hard work
Yeah.
to just be caught in a day.
Moving on to some of the most famous people that were there. Al Capone served 7 months there.
Okay.
We'll talk a bit, when we get to the ghost portion, we'll talk a bit about his hauntings there. But he had notably a very plush cell. He had nice furniture. He had a radio. He would listen to waltzes.
Really?
Yeah, he was very wealthy.
Oh.
There is some debate over whether or not he ran to Philadelphia to be imprisoned and escape mob violence that was growing across the country. He did spend a fortune trying to get himself out, and he was originally sentenced to 12 months but served less than that, so he did get out a little early.
Okay.
And he vehemently denies that he ran to Philly to escape, but who could know? If you're escaping people trying to kill you and in a nice plush cell.
Right, I feel like that kind of lends itself to the theory.
Right.
If you have a bunch of nice things compared to the rest of your cellmates, that's just...
Right. And he was arrested on something so small. It was a failure to have a concealed carry permit.
Right, and he's done so many worse things. You'd think that if it wasn't...
Yeah, he could have paid someone off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So anyways, he was there. My favorite story about a prisoner there is Pep the dog.
Oh.
He was... Now, there is discussion on whether or not this is a real story or not. Not that I want a dog to be imprisoned, but for the sake of having one lighthearted thing about this place, right. I love this story. So Pep the dog killed the governor's cat.
Oh.
So he was sentenced to serve at Eastern State Penitentiary.
That's normal.
Yeah. And so some people say Pep was maybe he was the dog of someone that worked there, and he was like a mascot. Some say he actually was indeed sentenced.
Right.
I don't know that we'll ever know.
Right.
But it's a fun story.
Yes.
So given all of the torture, there's really no other way to state it, the literal torture and murders and deaths, it's no wonder that this place is said to be very haunted. So we're going to break it down with some of the different cell blocks. So cell block 12 was not built until 1911. And if you remember from the history, that's right when the Pennsylvania system was being phased out.
Gotcha.
So it's a bit different than the surrounding cells. The cells built for the Pennsylvania system had doors that slid shut and very small slots for food, which I've never been in an active prison, but seems very different than what things are nowadays.
Okay.
And the difference with cell block 12, though, was it featured less space in the cells because it was jammed between two existing blocks, and it only featured small, narrow windows. It's said to be haunted, and the things that come out of it is echoing voices down the cell block and cackling laughter.
Oh.
Yeah, and it can apparently be heard anywhere in the cell block. So it's kind of all-encompassing.
Okay.
Cell block 6 is right next to cell block 12, and it's known for shadowy figures darting along the walls. There's been a number of paranormal investigations done at Eastern State, more than we could ever watch. I watched Ghost Hunters and then the BuzzFeed one, and both of them noted these shadowy figures that seem to exist there. So no audio things in cell block 6, but definitely some freaky images.
Okay. That's what I was going to ask. Like, do they make noises or do they just pass you by and like dementors? You know what I mean? Like,
and actually in the BuzzFeed research, they put motion sensors and tried to like catch the figure running back and forth. Yeah. So pretty cool. But it just shows you how different each cell block is.
Yes.
Okay, getting into some of the more famous ones. Cell block 4. It's known for visions of ghostly faces. But we have Gary Johnson, who has a first-person account there. He was a maintenance guy who was responsible for helping maintain the locks of the prison, and in a historical way.
Okay.
So in the early 1990s, he was working in cell block 4, and he had just opened an old lock, and he said he felt when he opened it, he released something. And suddenly a force gripped him so tightly that he was unable to move. He described a negative, horrible energy that exploded out of the cell when he opened the door. And he said that for the time he was unable to move, he was tormented by faces on the cell walls, and in particular one that beckoned to him.
That's terrifying.
I know. Imagine being a historian and that happens.
Right.
Yeah. Terrifying.
Right. I mean, not being able to move in general is terrifying. Like, you know when people get like sleep paralysis and you can feel like that in itself is just terrifying. So seeing these like figures.
Right.
Oh, that must have been awful.
Yeah, and even with the shadowy figures, it's like the building itself has very low lighting. Again, it's not a current building. Even when I was there, it was freaky. Yeah. Things aren't well lit and your eyes can play tricks on you, but seeing literal faces, that is next level.
Yes.
So the final block we'll talk about before we talk about some other things was block 15, and that was death row. And so similarly to the hole, there are a lot of reports of paranormal activity there. There are reports of the running shadowy figures, but most commonly people hear screams echoing throughout.
Ooh.
The BuzzFeed investigation actually did capture multiple screams on recording. So again, I always try to look at things through a skeptical lens. It is low lighting. Your eyes could play tricks on you if you hear that there are these shadowy figures there. They confirmed in this investigation that there was only 4 people that were on site at the time. One was the tour guide. Also maybe a guard, I don't know. Look at it however you want, I guess. Yeah. That was leading around the 2 investigators in a maintenance man, but they had asked the maintenance man to leave, so it is unlikely he could have made the noise. And they have footage of the tour guide, why? Tour guide standing silently during this scream.
Oh my gosh.
So you can see the 2 guys, they're not screaming. You can see her, they're not screaming. And then the only other person would be the camera person, which...
Right.
Why? So, again...
Probably the cameraman just be like, ah!
Right. So, again, even through a skeptical lens, definitely proof of something.
Right.
So going back to Capone, he was there for 7 months, like I said, had his very nice cell. But that doesn't mean he was above these hauntings. He was responsible for the Valentine's Day Massacre, which was a shooting of 7 different gangsters, and he killed a man named Jimmy.
Okay.
And he could be heard by other prisoners screaming for Jimmy to leave him alone.
Was Jimmy was killed elsewhere?
Yes.
And then came to the...
Yes.
Ooh.
I know, very vengeful.
Followed him.
Very petty.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, he just followed that guy.
Yeah, and I mean, what else is he doing? So
that's true.
So he actually, part of why he is said to have wanted out so badly is because this Jimmy figure would not leave him alone and would do things, allegedly, like turn on his record player or open his drawers in the middle of the night, in addition to physically tormenting him. So even Al Capone, not above these ghost things.
Right. Had a record player, was also haunted.
Yes. Had very nice rugs and pictures. Also ghost haunt.
So I guess, Jimmy probably just wanted to follow him wherever he went. Yeah. But it feels like the building itself just has like a weird energy.
It does.
You know what I mean?
I think that's what it is. It's such a place of so much paranormal activity, for lack of a better term.
Right.
That I feel like if there's somewhere you're going to haunt someone, that's a place to do it.
Right.
And especially when they can't leave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very captive audience for a haunting.
Yes.
So Ghost Hunters, as I said, is one of the investigators that did an episode. And what I like that they do is at the end of the episode, they try to debunk things that they've captured. Again, if you're going to do this kind of stuff, it's good to have a skeptic's lens. Mm-hmm. So some of the things that they captured were cold sensations. They did literally get a thermometer showing drops of temperatures.
Okay.
They did say that because it's an old building, this could have just been, natural drops and changes in temperature fluctuations. Footsteps that they heard when everyone was standing still. These shadowy figures that were captured on camera. Seeing different orbs and seeing mist. So that was everything they caught while they were doing the investigation. Once they got back and tried to debunk stuff, they confirmed that the orbs and mist could have been invalid.
Right.
Things like dust flying up or bugs flying across the camera.
Right.
The cold sensations, as I said, could have been just natural fluctuations. Footsteps and shadowy figures were where they kind of got stuck on how to debunk it. The footsteps could have theoretically been from someone else in the building, but no one else was there to their knowledge. And the one shadowy figure in that is specifically causing them trouble moved in a way that seemed not human.
Oh.
So they tried to map it into a human movement, and they couldn't justify how it moved. It seemed to run at them in almost an animal way.
Oh, that's so weird.
They said, or a demonic way.
Okay.
And so that led them to conclude that there is some sort of paranormal activity there.
Okay.
So take it with what you will. Ghost hunters, I'd say legit in terms of if you're in the realm of paranormal activity.
Right.
So our question always on this podcast is, would you visit this place of paranormal phenomenon? Now, there are layers to this question. There are different times, right? So they no longer have that haunted walkthrough. They stopped it because of COVID, and they decided not to go back to it because they thought that it just generated bad press, and they really do try to provide such a factual, historical lens.
Right.
And that just kind of leans into the supernatural.
Okay.
So what they have now is called Halloween nights, and they have different themed bars there. You can walk through. I'm sure it's still a very spooky experience.
Right, yes.
So first question, would you visit this place during the day?
Would I visit it during the day by myself? No.
Right.
But if there were other things going on, yeah. Like, I would do the tour if there was a tour guide or guard.
It's an individual audio tour. You can take guided tours. So maybe if like you and your partner went.
Yes.
Okay.
If Zach and I went, yeah, because he doesn't really believe in this stuff.
Right.
So I think that if I was ever like, what was that? He would be like, probably a door. Or like somebody like I hit the wall or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think he could probably balance me out. But if I was doing it, I could not do that by myself, even in the daytime.
Yeah, I went with my family, and it was definitely a sobering experience on its own, aside from the ghosts.
Well, and that's the other thing is, as someone who did like major in history, I feel like I would be really sad, like you had said in the beginning. I think I would be really, really sad, and maybe that would take some of the fright out of it, but again, I wouldn't want to be doing that by myself.
Yeah, it really does. Reading some of the placards, it does make your skin crawl, thinking like this is out of a horror movie and literally happened here.
Yes, yeah.
So then I'm guessing would you visit at night is definitely a no.
See, I don't know. Is there any light? Like in the daytime, is it any brighter?
So, yes, I think especially for these Halloween nights, because, you know, it's set up to be a Halloween event. So they have to, for safety reasons, they have to have lights. And I mean, if you're in like themed bars, they have 4 different attractions. One of them is a themed bar. I don't know what the other 3 are.
Right.
I would go for a Halloween night.
Yeah.
I would not have gone for a Fright night, and I would not go at night without other people there.
Agreed.
It just can't.
Agreed. No, even if other people were there, even if they had guided tours at night, I don't think I would do it. I don't think I could. I feel like if I genuinely, like, I do believe that there is paranormal activity here, but I also think my mind would just go crazy.
Oh, yeah.
And I would start seeing stuff all over the place.
Right.
That even wasn't there. So I don't think I could do it at
night. Right. Hearing all the accounts and knowing, I mean, even when I was there in the day, I was like looking everywhere, like, are there footsteps that I'm not hearing?
Yeah.
Is there something that I could see, you know?
Right.
Because I'm interested. But
yes.
Yeah, so I guess the summary for this place is maybe with certain stipulations we would visit.
Yes. My own camera crew with only 5 people in the building? No.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for listening to this week's episode. Be sure to tune in next Thursday for our next episode to see what we investigate next.